you kind of began with every child deserves a mother and father. We would say that is actually too weak of a statement. It is every child has a right to be known and loved by their mother and father.
What we do with children is not only the most important issue that a society has to face, it's all throughout Scripture. Proverbs 13:22, a good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children. We're to think multi-generationally. The Bible emphasizes the importance of children. But here's the problem. The government policies that we see today often sideline the needs of children on behalf of adults. And children end up getting sacrificed. Why? What is going on, and what role can and should the church play to make sure that the rights of children are prioritized? Now, more than ever, Christians need to champion the rights and well-being of future generations. So welcome to the Truth Changes Everything podcast. We're exploring where God is at work, changing everything through Jesus. And today we're going to be talking about how the truth changes the way we handle the rights of children. This discussion is intense and probably going to challenge a lot of your thoughts and preconceptions. And I know I know it's going to happen because Katy, Faust, and Josh Wood are our guests today. Katy is the founder and president of Them Before Us, a global movement defending children's right to their mother and father. You heard her before. She publishes, speaks, testifies on why marriage and family are matters of justice for children. And Josh is the executive director of Them Before Us. He's studied and done work in humanitarian and disaster leadership and spent his career in nonprofit leadership and church ministry. So we're going to have a big discussion to talk about things like abortion, in vitro fertilization, what different political parties, Democrats and Republicans, are doing about these different issues, and how we need to, as a society, put the needs of children ahead of our own needs. Please welcome Katy, Faust, and Josh Wood to the show. Katy and Josh, welcome to the Truth Changes Everything podcast.
Thanks for having us.
We are going to have a vibrant discussion today on a lot of topics that are inconvenient in today's political environment, but nevertheless, we need to talk about them. They're mission critical. And you guys run this ministry called Them Before Us. I'd love for you to just describe a little bit of what you do.
I'll give you a bit of the overview of the mission, and then I'll let Josh deliver the fine details. But basically, we were formed to defend the fundamental rights of children, specifically in matters of marriage and family. And what we see is that I think a lot of your listeners will understand and be familiar with the fact that children have a right to life, a natural right to life that persists and must be defended and protected, whether or not our civil laws recognize that fundamental right or not. Similarly, children have a right to be known and loved by both their mother and father. And if you look at any marriage or family issue through the lens of children's right to their mother and father, you come out with not only the right personal decisions, but the right policy decisions as well. So at its heart, at its core, what we do at Them Before Us is we say, we need to put them, the children, before us, the adults, on matters of marriage and family. That means that we are going to wade into conversations about the definition of marriage, about when we should greenlight divorce, a critique of modern families, a high critique of big fertility, including IVF, sperm and egg donation, surrogacy, a proper understanding of adoption, pushing back against trends like polyamory, polygamy, cohabitation. I mean, I tell people, give us enough time and we will trigger you too. Because everything that we are talking about here is high stakes, not just for adults, but especially for children. And getting this right, defending children, putting them before us, means that adult interest is going to have to take a backseat at some point. And that includes, right, some of your listeners, or maybe all of your listeners at some point.
I think we're probably going to find a few areas where we're going to step on toes today. But that's what this show is all about. It's why it's called Truth Changes Everything. We've got to get at the truth, even if we do find it to be inconvenient. Josh, what would you add to what you guys are working on at them versus us, or them before us.
So the application then hits in two places. It's going to be on the legal side and on the cultural side. So we talk a lot about changing hearts and changing laws. So we have to take these principles and break it down for parents and for people in positions of authority making decisions and help them understand. You talked about truth. What is the truth? What is the true cost of going outside of what we believe to be God's design, what we can see in natural law for children? And the true cost is we either invest and tell the truth early in relationships, how we form relationships, how we form families. We either tell the truth and invest early, or we will all as a society pay the price down the stream. My background was in philanthropy, in foundations. I saw lots of grants being given to millions of dollars being given downstream. We all saw that through COVID. Billions of dollars. It doesn't fix problems. It costs, we cannot print enough money to fix broken families across this country. We have to get back to the root, fix that, how we form relationships, get that right. If we ever want to return to a prosperous, thriving country full of communities, full of families.
We are recording this the day after President Trump's speech to the joint session of Congress, watched by a lot of people in this country. And one of the things he did, and I thought this was a startling moment, he listed out government grants, Josh, that had been given to various countries around the world. And almost all of the ones he listed were anti what you guys are talking about. Like, our federal government with our money was intentionally around the world promoting policies that break the family. And it was fascinating because I saw Republicans boo because they were distressed by these expenditures. And I saw Democrats boo because they didn't want these expenditures cut. And I think right there on television in front of the entire country, you see symbolized this major cultural divide about all of these issues. But I like what you guys are doing because you're saying, okay, look, we're going to disagree about policies and all these things. If we start with putting children first, then we're going to be much more likely to arrive at the right solutions. So let's talk about this book that you guys compiled on pro-child politics. And you've got a lot of experts who are speaking to a bunch of different topics. But I want to hear from you what motivated you to write this book. You know, because we were just talking as a staff earlier. I mean, we need more books like we need more holes in our heads. But there are key policy distinctives that you guys are bringing out, and I really want to get into that a little bit.
Let me jump in real quick on this, the grants and how this got cut. I think there's a point to be made here about this almost cognitive dissonance between those who have flourished in this society, who have gone through school, academically successful, stayed out of trouble, have purchased homes, have advanced in their careers. The family structures of those most, successful individuals, whether they were born here or they immigrated here and found this economy to be one that met, they had the goals and the gifts to succeed in. Their family structures are all the same. But yet, we've turned and we've now given, in the name of inclusivity, trying to promote all sorts of things, we've given to finance alternate forms. We've granted to other countries to export these ideas, to finance alternate forms of doing this, in the name of like this misplaced empathy and compassion. It's always struck me that the people with these compassionate and so-called empathetic hearts are not advocating for policies and not advocating for forming families in the way that they are choosing to. They are not leaving, they are doing something different than what they are now exporting around the world. And that has always struck me that if we were being honest, there is a pathway to success, even to flourish economically in this country. But oftentimes what we finance is completely divorced from that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's what Rob Henderson calls luxury beliefs. right? Beliefs that it's convenient to hold, that virtue signal, right, their supposed, like Josh said, empathy or compassion, but things that they never themselves would live by or abide by or follow in their own personal lives. And like Josh said, we have become an exporter of these child-destroying, family-demolishing principles. And really, it is a form of woke colonialization. That's really what's been taking place. And we saw it very, very clearly in the kinds of grants that our development branch of the U.S. government, USAID, was handing out, like overpriced candy all across the world. These are not things that are going to set anybody up, especially children, for flourishing. And that's, why I'm enthusiastic about a lot of those programs no longer being funded by my money, by our tax dollars. But what it is emblematic of a mood that has been generated, especially among the progressive left, that what is the highest goal? What is the most important aim? And it is adult autonomy, especially in the realm of sex. Sexual fulfillment, sexual identity has become the highest aim, the highest good, the thing to which everything must be sacrificed. And especially in matters of sex, what is always sacrificed is children. So I'm going to let Josh talk about pro-child politics because actually it was his idea. But what we try to do in that book is to say, look, in matters of marriage and family, we have to put them before us. When we do, we get the right personal decisions and we get the right policy outcomes. But actually, in every area, not just in matters of marriage formation, we need to put them before us. So that was the motivation behind the project.
Well, one of the things that I find most striking is that they talk about when families are not formed and kids don't have connections to their parents, those parents lose what they call a stake in the future. And it's this idea that if you get too many of those in a society, they will become overly violent, disconnected, and they'll make policy decisions that aren't in the best interest of the rest of the country or the future of the country. And it kept coming up for me, and as we've talked about putting children first in family formation, it occurred to me that across all areas of our government, all these different policy issues, we rarely think long term. I mean, we are, again, even in development, the humanitarian world. I got a master's in humanitarian development from Wheaton College. They would talk all the time about this like little window, what's happening right now, and you'd shell all this money in fixing these short-term problems instead of taking a step back and saying, how do we fix this bigger issue? And I think in our politics today, as it relates to family formation or our ethos in general about what is best for the child, you can apply that. And I said, Katy, we can apply this to energy. We can apply this to immigration. And let's have some adults telling the truth. Let's get the best people in here to say, if we were truly thinking about what is best for the child, what will not harm them now, and what will be best for them in the future, because after all, these are the people who have the smallest voice and will bear the biggest burden for our decisions. So how do we make this policy best for them? Let's get them to answer that question. What's happening right now that's harming them? And what could we do that would set them best up for success going forward? And what would that look like in a book? And Pro-Child Politics was the product of that conversation.
So is the audience for this people who have the opportunity to influence policy, say school board, city council, state legislature, Congress, or is it broader?
So I would say there are several key demographics that are going to benefit from this and that I pitch it to. Number one, a lot of people are going to buy the book because Abby Johnson wrote the chapter on life, for example. A lot of people are going to buy the book because co-founder of Moms for Liberty, Tiffany Justice, wrote the chapter on education. Some people are going to buy the book because Grover Norquist wrote the chapter on taxes. Okay, like some people are going to have an entry point because they've got one specific topic that they're really interested in and they want to understand what a child-centric perspective looks like on immigration or on ESG, DEI, or on digital technology. Okay, great. And then they're going to get a whole education on the other sectors that they may not know as well, whether that is the financial sector, the social sector, the national security sector, whatever it is, because this is the place, one of the very few places where those three different legs of conservatism come together: economic, social, and national. And so it does serve as a bit of a primer on all of these major, what can often feel like unwieldy or hard to understand issues, right? Like the environment or like climate or like energy or whatever. And we made these national experts boil down their subject matter into 3,000 words So it really is like you're going to get a very comprehensive understanding of religious liberty from somebody that, was the former, employee of one of the major firms that are fighting for religious liberty. Okay, so it serves as I'm going to make you holistically child-centric on all the different issues of politics, culture, economics, matters of national significance. Okay, we're going to give it to you all. But the other demographic that I really pitch it to is lawmakers, especially conservative lawmakers, because there is something distinctly conservative about prioritizing the next generation. In fact, that's what Molly Hemingway said in her blurb in Pro-Child Politics. She said, a funny thing happens when you put them before us on all of these different topics. You get genuine conservatism. And I would say that is probably the way to best understand the conservative progressive divide is if progressives elevate adult immediate gratification, especially in the sexual realm, but maybe in terms of just passing, the budget that they want because they want to continue to live as they want off of the debt that they want, regardless of the cost to the next generation. If that's what progressives are doing, elevating adult self, adult desire, adult priorities, adult identity, conservatism is the exact inverse of that. It is subjecting and submitting the immediate of what the adults want for the sake of the next generation. And so that's what you see in all these different areas. If you put children first, you are going to get true conservatism. So I tell the state level lawmakers, even the national level lawmakers, this is your hack. This is your messaging hack. You may not learn anything that's new about environmental policy. You might not learn anything new about pornography. You might not learn anything new about religious liberty. What you are going to learn is the way to get the most buy-in into the policies that you're trying to progress, that you're trying to push forward for demographics that maybe weren't going to take a lot of interest in it before, because now you are framing your message in terms of who you are for and shrouding it all in child protection, because that's exactly what it is.
Well, I love it. I spend at least a day every year training elected officials in biblical worldview. And I imagine that audience right away because they're looking for things they can introduce in the state legislature. Most state legislators are pretty bored because you're talking about where should the power lines go, how much money should be put toward trash disposal in the Capitol and all of these different things, when there are really big reasons why they ran for office that have nothing to do with those logistical things that every city, every state has to try to figure out. But as I'm working with them, the ones who've been the most successful in doing something are the staffers. Now, this is in Congress, okay? The staffers in state legislatures, the budget is so small, you don't have a lot there. But when we train congressional staffers, like we did one on transgender, and they went back and 3 days later stripped transgender surgeries out of all 12 appropriations bills. They can do things that make a difference immediately as well. So I think, I can see a lot of people who might want to get this book and then immediately turn around and hand it on to those who are in a position to do something right now. I want to kind of transition to the what I think is the core of your argument, that every child deserves a mom and a dad. And I hope I'm not misstating that, but I'm thinking back when I did my doctoral work 30 years ago, and it was a doctor of philosophy degree, and I was focusing in on communication development of children in the context of the home. Mm-hmm. What role does the father play? What role does the mother play? I got pushback 30 years ago for my entire committee on whether or not a mom and a dad with a biological child was a normal family situation. I had to comb through 500 pages of census data and make an argument to my committee that the group I was studying was actually most families. They already had decided that there's no such thing as a traditional family. Mm-hmm. But in your book, you talk about how that's currently dismissed as archaic, even oppressive, that it reaffirms the patriarchy, which is the source of all evils. Make the argument for us that this is something we need to reclaim.
Go ahead, Katy.
Well, I mean, Josh is very skilled at this. He could do it too. You said you kind of began with every child deserves a mother and father. We would say that is actually too weak of a statement. It is every child has a right to be known and loved by their mother and father. And this is not something that we can dismiss based on the decision of 5 Supreme Court justices. These realities don't go away because your governing board says, oh, there's no such thing as a nuclear family. These things are not going to change regardless of how we tinker with children in a laboratory. And it's not going to be overhauled, these fundamental rights of children, by stating love makes a family over and over and over. There are fundamental child realities that we can either recognize and respect and protect, or we can ignore and children will be victimized. What are those fundamental child realities? Children come from one man and one woman. Sociologically, they are going to thrive in the care of that one man and one woman when they're married to each other. Statistically, they are the most likely to be safe and loved when they are raised by that man and woman. Biologically, they gain their biological identity. They have a better chance at successfully answering the question, who am I, if they're raised by that one man and one woman, and, like you know, probably better than me at this point, they are developmentally advantaged when they are raised by that man and that woman because men and women offer distinct and complementary benefits to children. So these are realities that will not change. It doesn't matter what culture and law and technology do to that discussion of family formation. These are the fundamental realities of children. We either respect them and we raise children who are protected and it leads to a flourishing society, or we ignore these child realities. We damage the children, and we get to the point where we are now, where we have a nearly non-functional next generation of children because we have so obliterated their fundamental rights and needs to the point where many of them are non-functional. So take your pick. Which one do you want? Recognizing who children are and then respecting their fundamental needs. And that means everybody. It's not just the gays that have to do it. It is everybody. Single, married, gay, straight, fertile, and infertile, who recognize these rights and conform to them, or children are victimized and our society will collapse. Those are the options before you today.
I remember sharing this idea with someone that I worked with, and that there's an ideal, that this ideal we can never afford to lose. And after the meeting, I remember going to someone who I knew was parenting alone, and this was not by her choice. And I said, I really don't want to have what I said, almost sheepishly. I'm like, I really don't want what I said to offend you or to come across that I don't think that you're doing the best job you can, or that your kid won't turn out well. And she said, there's nobody who's a bigger advocate for having help than someone who's been doing it alone. Yeah. And that told me, I'm like, we can't go into this sheepishly. We're protecting not only those heroes who are the spouse who wanted to stick it out and wanted reconciliation and got left behind and are doing this by themselves, but also the kids who are, statistically, a large number of them are going to lose connection with that spouse when that divorce happens or when they do separate. So it gave me courage to say, we cannot sacrifice truth in the name of inclusivity here.
Wow. So good. Well, this is, when you talk about moms and dads doing different things for kids, if there was any breakthrough in my doctoral research, it was that, because the approach of most researchers at the time was fathers are just husbands of mothers. They're irrelevant to the raising of children. And what we were able to demonstrate is that, yes, there are more communication breakdowns between fathers and children. Yes, fathers are more didactic. But it turns out that the fathers are a bridge to the outside world.
That's right.
That somebody's got to play the role of that person to take that child who's being nurtured by a mother and help prepare that child for reality. Okay. And fathers or some kind of a father figure had to play that role. Fascinating stuff. Okay, there are a lot of controversial things we need to get into. So let's start with the one that's going to divide our audience directly in half, IVF. And during the 2024 campaign, it was clear that both Democrats and Republicans were in favor of IVF. Well, your ministry takes a firm stand against it. And I'd love for you to explain why you think both political parties favor IVF, and why. I just spoke on Israel yesterday, so IDF is in my head. IVF, and why, from a biblical perspective, you're against it. And I know this might take some time, but we need to come away much more thoughtful about something that's kind of a throwaway line for both political parties.
As someone that came in from the marriage and family wasn't my background. So I'm coming into the organization a couple years ago, and IVF was one of those things that I'm like, I have to understand, why is this such a sticking point? This wasn't in the news at the time. And as Katy began to articulate the different challenges with it, I began to understand how few people really understand, when we say IVF, what are we talking about? What is this process of creating children in glass? What is it? And so that's why we at Them Before Us, we try to take an approach of, we always, when we talk about IVF, we always articulate the very specific things that occur within many of the ways people do IVF, the things that we would say harm the rights of children. So Katy, I don't know if you want to jump in from there, but it was through articulating those specifics that I began to understand, oh, well, really anybody who is pro-life, when they know what this process entails, because I think the industry hides behind not reporting data and not really disclosing how it all works, even sometimes to the men and women going through it. Let me be clear. There are men and women who go through it, who give us letters, come back to us and say, if I would have known the life and death decisions that I was faced with down the road, I would have never started this process. You need to be strong, be courageous, and tell people the truth, because there are people going into those offices today who have no idea what can of worms they're opening. So I don't know, Katy, if you want to knock out the kind of what is specifically IVF and what we find harmful with it, but I thought that was helpful to start.
Well, you mentioned addressing this from a biblical perspective. And I think that generally the biblical consensus is, anytime you're separating sex, marriage, and babies, you are on very perilous ground. There really isn't a situation where you separate sex, marriage, and babies where there is not incredible fallout, especially for children, often for women, and definitely for all of society. But I will actually let you ask John Stonestreet those kinds of questions. I'm going to bring you the children's rights answer on why IVF should be approached with incredible suspicion. And it's based on 3 fundamental child rights. Number 1, children have a right to life. Number 2, children have a right to their mother and father. And number 3, children have a right to be born free and not bought and sold. So IVF imperils all 3 of those rights. First, IVF destroys probably between 92 and 97% of the little lives that are created. Okay, so by the numbers, IVF is responsible for the demise of more little lives by 4 times the amount than Planned Parenthood. So if you really believe that children have a right to life, you are going to fight both abortion and IVF. We are talking about anywhere from 2 to 10 million children that are lost every year by the best estimate, because as Josh said, Big Fertility doesn't have any kind of obligation to share the data on what they do with these tiny lab-made babies, okay? But what we do know is they rampantly victimize children's right to life, to the point where it's a safe estimate to say only about 2.3% of babies created through these technologies will be born alive. Every child that is an absolute gift of God. I just wish we could have met the other, 95% that didn't make it through the process alive. Number 2, IVF routinely victimizes children when it comes to their right to be known and loved by their mother and father. About 90,000 children are born through IVF every year. Probably between 30 and 60,000 of them will be separated from their mother or father at the moment of conception. Some of them will be raised in the home of a man and woman. Many of them will be raised in the home without any man or woman. Okay. And so what we're talking about here is the intentional commercial motherlessness and fatherlessness that we usually decry in the world when it takes place through tragedy. We now incentivize, promote, endorse, and legalize through the form of IVF, through tinkering with children right at the moment of their conception. And finally, children should not be bought and sold. This is a critical human rights imperative. And when I was the assistant director at the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world, it was very clear, very bright line. If you are going to bring a child into your home as an adoptive parent, money can never go from you to the birth parents. You can never pay a birth mother to relinquish her child. Okay, that is called trafficking. What is it that Big Fertility does, especially as it relates to donor sperm and egg and somebody else's womb, which almost always involves IVF, okay? Big fertility is built on direct payments to genetic fathers, to genetic mothers, to birth mothers. So you are paying somebody to relinquish their parental rights on the child. It is a direct money exchange to acquire a baby. By adoption standards, IVF is complicit in a lot of child trafficking. So your listeners are going to say, oh, but Jeff, there's a way that you can do it in a way that's pro-life, where children aren't being bought and sold, where they're not losing their right to life, where they are going to be raised by their mother and father. That is true in a very slim number of cases. That would require a husband and wife using their own gametes, creating only the number of embryos they intend to immediately implant, not doing any of the pre-implantation screening, which 75% of clinics employ, not taking them up on the sex selection, which 73% of clinics employ, not doing any of the testing to see if they have the right intelligence or eye color, which boutique clinics employ, and saying we are going to implant every egg. We're not going to freeze any, because if they go into the freezer, they very often do not come out. And that is how a pro-life approach to IVF looks. The problem is that is so cost prohibitive, virtually nobody does it, and you will argue against your own doctor if you try to pursue it. So I'm sorry. The hard truth is you have got to let go of the fiction that IVF is about helping infertile couples have babies. It's not. IVF is about on-demand designer babies shipped worldwide, and it destroys many times more little lives than the abortion industry.
That's a very clear case, and I appreciate it. And you read my mind, because I do think that there are some people who they want to grab for anything they think could possibly be pro-life, and people having babies who otherwise might not be able to certainly would be, to some people considered to be the pro-life argument. So what was, say that figure again. Only most of the fertilized eggs through IVF never come to, will be born alive. What was the figure? 93%? What was?
So here's the problem, Jeff. Unlike adoption agencies, unlike organ donation, we don't track what we do with these lab-made babies. IVF, big fertility, operates virtually regulation-free, so we have to piece together these numbers. Our best estimate, as recorded and anchored and calculated by the Heritage Foundation, is 2.3% of children created in a laboratory will be born alive. The vast majority won't make it through the process, either the freezing or the thawing. They will not survive the grading. I mean, Josh was just looking at, I'm going to let him talk about this afterwards, the grading process of embryos. They will not survive the pre-implantation genetic screening. They will be deemed to be the wrong sex. So the vast majority of lab-made babies are going to be discarded as medical waste, donated to research, or frozen forever. But Josh, tell us a little bit about what you saw. He was just like exploding on, what he was seeing on Instagram in terms of the numbers and the way that people determine which embryos to keep and which embryos to discard, and how many little lives you have to do to get to the exact little life that you want at the exact time.
Yeah, because we want to be careful that, in normal pregnancy that occurs without IVF, there is miscarriage. There's embryos that fail to implant. One of the challenges with IVF is that the vast, vast, vast majority, the best statistics we can tell would put it likely over 90%, aren't even given a chance to be transferred. So they're not even, that's the wonderful thing about pregnancy, the way, again, when a mom and a dad have sex, get pregnant, they're giving every single embryo the best chance possible at life. In IVF, that's not the case. So often, the gauntlet includes being, matured in glass, which we've seen. Again, statistics are tough, but we've seen that can present unnecessary harms to the embryo. Then there's all sorts of screenings, which we've seen for disease can produce false positives Again, you're just rolling the dice here every time you do this, with a lot of families screening out things that they often have themselves, looking for a disease that they were given the opportunity to live with. Again, maybe it's really difficult for them, but they're screening out still something that they have themselves. If you make it through the screening, they're then looking at what's the grade. And this grade, I saw a fertility doctor post it yesterday. It's essentially a quadrant, and they color different squares. It's not this one can make it and this one can't. It's this one doesn't have a high likelihood of making it. This one does. Well, the studies show that when one that doesn't have a good chance is implanted successfully, it's not like the kid comes out and there's everything wrong with them. No, it was all to do with what's the likelihood of implantation. And it's all gray and red and blue. I mean, this whole thing is so subjective. Well, I have a 5A. Well, I have and it's well, then this is a better chance than this one. It's not black and white. This one won't make it, this one will. We think this one's better than this one. And doctors have their own opinions on where all these numbers should fall. So you go through this whole process and you get to the end, and you've got, families looking at 10, 12 embryos, and they say, well, we think there's 4 really good candidates, and the other 8, we suggest you discard or freeze indefinitely. And
wow,
okay, if I'm a family, and you got to really put yourself in their shoes, because again, my wife and I went to a fertility clinic and were told we needed to do IVF. Luckily, we were told to get a second opinion by a doctor who would actually look at my wife's health concerns. And we got a natural solution and didn't have to do IVF after having 3 miscarriages, which that's a whole nother lane, Jeff, of how little we've looked into alternates. How much science and how much medicine how many dollars have we put into diagnosing underlying conditions? But when we walked in, they told us you have bad eggs, you need to go through IVF, and we're heartbroken. We've had multiple miscarriages, and suddenly you're on you're right going through this threshold of the door of a whole process that once you've harvested eggs, you've hyperstimulated your wife's ovaries. She can have all sorts of health complications from that. They tell you we should go ahead. We got 14, 15 eggs. We should go ahead and fertilize all of them. You say, well, that gives us the best chance, but I don't want to have 3 or 4 lives to deal with. Well, you'll never have that happen. Okay, well, we'll do them all. And then you get all the way to the end of this process, and you tried not to do screening, and you have 6 or 7. And let's say a couple of your tries go well and you have 3, 4 kids now and you're in your mid-30s, but there's 6 left. Suddenly you're a couple who tried to do it the right way, who was told statistically you'll never have embryos left over. And you're now facing life or death decisions with 5 or 6 embryos that your doctor told you you'd never have. You've got 4 beautiful children, 6 on ice, and you lie awake at night every night going, what am I going to do? I am too old now to have 6 more pregnancies. I was lied to. I should have been informed. Someone should have sat me down and, quite honestly, scared me with the potential. Give me every situation. What if every single one's successful? What's my worst case? Well, your worst case is you've got 4 children on ice now. You're 38 with 3 kids.
Wow. It's horrifying to think about.
You have to think, how often are we put into situations where we have to make decisions like this? I mean, couples are writing us letters saying, this keeps us up every night. Katy, what do we do? And we have nothing but grace and compassion for this, but it also motivates us to say, we're going to make sure every couple listening to your show right now that's about to walk into that room is equipped with all the knowledge they need to make the decisions that are best for them, again, but best for their children.
Yeah, that's right. And then the policy. So when people read pro-child politics, they'll be able to see here are the kind of policies you can put in place that bring proper regulations to this.
Pro-child politics, you're not going to get a whole lot of policy recommendations on IVF, but you will if you come to our website. Okay. Especially if you're a policy maker, we have issued responses to President Trump's executive order that make it very clear how children are victimized through these technologies and why this has to be rejected. The answer is not better access. It is not cheaper treatments. It is, like Josh said, doing the actual work of diagnosing and resolving the underlying fertility issues so you can get pregnant on your own and you're not reliant on a technician, or you don't have to pay $12,000 to $25,000 to create a a batch of embryos that are then going to have to go through the gauntlet of genetic screening and sex selection and grading and all of that. So like we really do need to look at what is going on with fertility in this country. Some of it is environmental. Some of it is diagnostic in terms of medical conditions. A lot of it is lifestyle choices. The reason we're having such a big problem with infertility in this country is we are not getting married soon enough, and we're not choosing to have children soon enough. Women are believing the horrible lie that their bodies can easily get pregnant when they are 33, 38, 42. We have sold women the lie that you should first establish yourself in a career, get a master's degree, tour the world and, explore, your own like desires as a woman. And then you can get married, and then you can settle down, and then you can have kids. Ladies, those messages are lies. You should be a wife and mother early if you can. Your body may not cooperate with you in your 30s and certainly not in your 40s. You can have it all in terms of family and career. But if you do not want to fight the way you're naturally aligned, the way you're naturally designed, do marriage and children first. Your career will be there later. And I promise you, everybody telling you that the career is what is going to satisfy you, jump on TikTok or Instagram and look at the videos of women who are in their late 30s and early 40s who understand that they have passed up so many opportunities to get married and have children, who realize, you know what, being partner at the law firm and working 70-hour weeks turns out doesn't fulfill me. And now I have missed the opportunity to do the one thing that I really, really want, which is to be a mom. So I'm so sorry for what the culture is feeding you. Look at your body, look at the way it's designed, look at aligning yourself with how humans have formed relationships and made families all throughout history, and go with that, not necessarily the trends that say your master's degree is the thing you should be reaching for.
Yeah.
You can tell how powerful this desire is and how much people want those years back just by the fact that this industry is thriving. People are these are good people, good families who are willing to accept that the byproduct of this process is anywhere from, we're not even sure, 1 to up to 10 million children frozen on day 5 of life. It shows you when people do realize this and they want a family so badly, they're willing to accept that this is the cost of doing business. And we don't do anybody a favor by not telling them the truth that fertility, taking a drug to keep yourself from getting pregnant could have long-term effects to your fertility, pushing you believing you can just start after 30 and you're not going to be, you're going to have no consequences. You're going to be just as fertile as when you were 25. Those may be the nice things to say, scare quotes, but they're not the truth. And too many people that's being shielded from them. And then they get in these situations in their late 30s and they're like, oh my gosh, I will do anything. And we can't allow that good desire to create children, to have a family. We can't allow that desire to override a child's right to be known and loved by their mother and father, their right to life. Again, not just for the ones that make it through the gauntlet, but for the 9 other ones that we never get to see, that can't speak up for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are so many more things I would love to talk with you guys about. I really would love to get to, abortion and transgender in their relationship to this question. If we only have 5 minutes or so, which one should we tackle?
Abortion.
Okay. So on the abortion issue, that we just went through an election, we saw that the Republican stance on abortion changed quite a lot in the way it was articulated. Middle ground, trying to find middle ground positions. We need to hear better. We need to listen better to all of this stuff. I think there were a lot of us who were distressed by that, and I'd love for you to just jump in.
Okay. We spent quite a bit. We have a radio show on American Family Radio. We spent several episodes critiquing the way the GOP platform was co-opted and overhauled, honestly, through a very undemocratic process at the behest of Donald Trump, because he's not a social conservative, and I don't think he's convictionally pro-life. He is a pragmatist, and he understood that that sort of middle ground message was the way to one part of a pathway to the White House. Fine. It was a political decision. Here's what we need to learn, those of us who adhere to a biblical worldview and genuinely understand that children have a right to life from the moment of conception. It is you put your feet in the ground and you plant them firmly and you don't let anything move you. Not the cultural winds, not the party, not the president that is doing a lot of very good things on a lot of good issues. They don't change your position. You stand firmly on biblical truth that is always going to have a direct connection to child protection, and you don't move. Let the party come back to you and not the other way around. So that's the number one thing. Number two is we need to understand the very direct connection between abortion and reproductive technologies. This is something that the Democrats have recognized for years. When they talk about reproductive rights, they're no longer just talking about abortion. They are talking about IVF access. They understand that these two things, the baby taking industry and the baby making industry, stem from the same worldview. And that is that children are items, they are accessories, they are objects to be cut and pasted, welcomed or discarded based on the desires of adults. Both industries, abortion and reproductive technologies, are going to objectify and diminish and deperson and dehumanize unborn children. They understand the connection. We don't, and we need to. Okay, the same mentality that says if a child is unwanted, I can violate their right to life and force them out of existence through abortion is the same mentality that says if a child is very wanted, I can force them into existence through IVF, even if it victimizes many child's right to life and or that child's right to a mother and father. Both of them see children as items to serve adults. They are not. They are individual humans that, like Josh said, have an inability to speak up for themselves and protect themselves. When we are talking about child protection, the other side has understood very clearly that the umbrella of reproductive rights is going to encompass IVF access, abortion, government-funded birth control, subsidized surrogacy. We need to understand that they are right, that all of these things go together. We just need to take the exact opposite position. Because children have a right to life, we must reject both abortion and reproductive technologies. So that is where I think that the administration has gotten it wrong, both in terms of softening their position on abortion and by announcing that they want to make IVF more accessible. However, I will say, I think that there, even in the last 12 months since the Alabama decision came down that Josh, I believe, referenced earlier, we actually saw a lot more high profile, especially pro-lifers, definitely conservatives saying, this is not the path forward. If, especially in light of the new MAHA wing of the MAGA movement, circumventing fertility is not a MAHA position. Healing infertility, getting to the source of why women are struggling to conceive, that is the MAHA position. And for that, you want to do things like research NAPRO technologies, natural procreative technologies. You want to look at restorative medicine. And we have policy recommendations for state level lawmakers who would like to advance those kinds of the bills that genuinely will help people struggling with infertility, rather than simply bankrolling an industry that victimizes children in nearly every way kids can be victimized.
Yeah, that's very well put. And I appreciate that. I think I see that as a path that could actually be pursued. Yeah, so many more issues that we could talk about. Health issues. I'm sorry that came at the very end of the show because this is huge. Well, guys, thank you for your work. Thank you for taking a stand. And I'm kind of picturing that we in the community of believers in Jesus Christ need people like you who can articulate very well why we need to plant the flag here and not be ashamed of doing it. So thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to be with you. We would like, if you guys are interested in this and learning more, come to thembeforeus.com, subscribe. There's so much happening in the world of child protection right at that moment of conception in terms of family formation and really protecting kids against some pretty nefarious global forces. And we would love to equip you on defending them, because honestly, the politicians aren't going to do it. It's going to be you and me.
Thank you to my guests, Katy Faust and Josh Wood, for coming on the show today. Here's the website for this organization, because they mentioned several different resources that you can get there that aren't even in the book that they've recently published. It's thembeforeus.com, thembeforeus.com. This podcast is a resource of Summit Ministries. We come alongside the rising generation, their trainers, parents, and influencers, so that young adults may know God's truth and become champions of a biblical worldview. To learn more about Summit Ministries, or to get resources to help the young people in your life, the training that they need that we can provide them here in Manitou Springs, Colorado, and in Lookout Mountain, Georgia this summer, all of this is super important. Just go to summit.org, start your journey. Let's be friends. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.